Hello and welcome to the Kennel Connection webinar on employee setup and commissions. My name is Scott. I'll be your presenter for today. My apologies for the slight delay on this the beginning of this webinar. You'll notice that my contact information is in the chat window. I can be emailed at scott@bluecrystalsoftware.com, or you can call me at 888-486-4343, extension 307. The question and answer session will take place in the chat window, but I do ask that you please refrain from entering any questions into the chat window until I'm done with a formal presentation. This should only take around a little over a half an hour at the most. We're going to be going over employee setup in Kennel Connection 6, as well as the new and improved commissions for employees in that section. So as you can see on the screen now, we have Kennel Connection 6 up. For those of you looking at this for the first time, we have the same features and abilities on the main page of Kennel Connection 6, however, with a slightly different format and functionality. The big difference here, for the most part, is the ribbon access to items within Kennel Connection, as opposed to the simple drop-downs in Kennel Connection 5. You can access the different aspects of the ribbon by clicking on the tabs, and you can minimize the ribbon by right-clicking on the tab bar, choosing Minimize Ribbon. And the ribbon will drop down whenever you choose the specific tabs. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to be leaving mine open. So if we click on the File tab and go over to the Setup section, we'll see that we have a nice icon here for our employee setup. Whenever new customers are setting up Kennel Connection, we always recommend that they start with the employee section and work their way backwards here, going to business info, system options, lists, inventory, etc. If you're using your login IDs and administrative access, the employee section is admin protected. So you can log in with the admin ID or an employee that has administrative access. So you'll see here we have on the General tab our list of employees. Selecting on them will show us the basic information surrounding them. The minimum information required to save an employee in the system is a login ID and password. I usually recommend them not being as predictable as mine, of course, and a last name and first name. After you have those 4 items in, you can save an employee, then go back later if you want to add additional information. The admin ID comes standard with Kennel Connection with the login ID admin and password KC4000. We do recommend at some point changing the password from KC4000 to something else, as that is the basic password that goes out with all copies of the Kennel Connection program. However, we do recommend leaving the login ID as admin, and just attaching whichever owner, manager, etc. that you want as the main admin, their name here, or even just leaving this admin in as a blank admin login. In cases in the future, if you have issues with your passwords or entry into the system, keeping the default admin makes that a lot easier. As you'll notice, the default admin has the inactive and administrative boxes grayed out. When setting up your employees, you can choose to make them administrative, which means they will have access to areas that require an admin password, such as the employee section. And then, of course, we have their title, if they have any kind of official title on their position, other contact information, including an email ID. If you are going to be sending your employees emails, you'll want to make sure that they have the email set up in the section here. And there's a couple areas coming up that you can email your employees that we'll be looking at. You can also choose whether your employee is a contractor or a straight employee, and other items here as well. And then at the bottom, you're going to choose what services your employees offer in the system. Checking these boxes will enable the employees to appear upon the drop-down menu in the system. So if your employee is a groomer, a bather, pet sitter, trainer, nails, other groom, or does special services, you'll want to make sure these boxes are checked so the employee appears in the drop-down when selecting them to attach. This is especially important if you're going to be offering commissions to those employees, and if you're going to be tracking who does what on your schedule. With Kennel Connection, we usually recommend deleting anything from the system if you can avoid it, for past records, etc. So with this in mind, if you have an employee that no longer is in your service, we do recommend instead of deleting them, although you do have that option, we prefer if you check the inactive box and save that employee. You'll notice that the employee turns to red, and the employee will no longer appear on any drop boxes in the system. You won't be able to apply them or add them to bookings or what have you, but their information will still be saved, including past payroll information, which could be especially important. If something happens where they come back, or if you just want to make them inactive during a leave of absence, all you have to do is go back to the employee record, click inactive, uncheck the box, click save. They're now back in the system. Another reason not to delete them. Once your basic information is set up here, one more thing we want to point out too, along with these other services, we have the default option. If you choose the default option for an employee, they are going to be the employee that appears for a service automatically when creating a booking. So if this, we'll keep this one. So if this employee is only a groomer, but they're the main groomer, you can choose default. Then whenever you create a groom booking, that groomer will automatically be applied to the groom assigned to that booking. I keep these on here just for testing purposes. Let's get that back. Once you've set up your basic information for the employee, you're going to move on to access rights. With the access rights section, you can choose what specific areas of Kennel Connection your employees have access to. We have a general section here, then specifically for module permissions, the inventory section, reports, invoices, receipts, clients and pets, and miscellaneous. Now, for regular employees, a couple of standard restrictions we usually recommend, unless the employee is a manager or has admin access that you approve of. We usually recommend removing the ability for employees to access to delete receipts or invoices, restrict their access to modifying or deleting time cards or employees, and some customers prefer to restrict access to certain reports, such as revenue reports and list reports. This prevents employees from printing out information regarding your revenue and your customers. To set your access rights, all you have to do is check the box if you want them to be able to access it and uncheck it. Two new additions to our access rights for those familiar with Kennel Connection 5. In Kennel Connection 6, we have an access right now for the Quickbooks Direct Sync. And we have a new one for the cash drawer. The cash drawer has been added specifically because now in Kennel Connection 6, you have the ability to, let me just close this for a second, access the cash drawer directly from the accounting tab. So now you no longer have to open an invoice in order to click the open drawer button. So unchecking the box for the cash drawer, if an employee is logged in and they do not have access to this, this will be grayed out. As a quick demonstration here, go into Scott's access rights and uncheck cash drawer and save that. Then log in as Scott. You'll notice that the open drawer button has now been grayed out. I cannot click on that or access that. That will work with any other settings you put in the system. If you deny access to a complete area, it'll be grayed out in the toolbar. If you restrict, for example, deleting invoices or receipts, the delete button in the receipts and invoices section will be grayed out. Now, in order to make sure that the login ID access rights work properly, you'll want to go to your System Options section, which is admin protected. And you need to make sure that you have two features selected on the Global tab. Those would be Use Startup Password and Security Features and Use Administration Login. When these two are checked, Employees need to log in with their IDs, and anything they do will be tracked in the system. And access rights will be applied properly. Usually in this type of situation, what we recommend is, as you'll see, we have a Login As button at the top. This is only visible if you have your login access rights and password set. When an employee leaves the computer, Login As will take you back to the main login screen. The next employee that comes to the screen will have to enter their name and password in order to access the system. From that point on, anything they do will be tracked in the Kennel Connection Audit Trail. You can access the Audit Trail by going to the Utilities section and clicking Audit Trail, which is also admin protected. As you can see, since I set it up, Kennel Connection has been tracking everything that has been taking place in the system. When the audit trail is not set up properly, when you are not using login IDs, the audit trail will still track information, but will only track basic information such as deletions, and will only have them assigned to the computer name. Whatever your computer is named will show up here under user. With login IDs set up properly and employees logging in, every transaction will be recorded, whether it's an addition, a modification, or a deletion in any module or area. For example, we have system options. The audit trail shows that I went into system options and made a modification. It shows employees modified. All the information that will appear on the right-hand side will include the exact date and time of the transaction, the user, the module that it was involved in, what the action was, and below any pertinent information regarding that. In the case of employees being modified, it gives the name of the modified employee. For invoices and receipts that have been created, modified, or deleted, you will have the customer name if applicable, the invoice number, the receipt amount, all that will appear down here. The audit trail is a very useful, essential part of the program. I highly recommend any customer to use it. It is a revenue saver in the long term, not only in tracking down possible mistakes or errors that take place, but also as an early warning sign of possible internal theft. For example, if you go into the audit trail and find a series of deleted invoices or receipts, sometimes that could be a red flag that points to somebody deleting transactions and pocketing the cash. So stuff like that, it's very important to set the audit trail up properly. We have an additional feature in Kennel Connection 6 for audit trails. We now have the ability, if I go into boarding, with the audit trail set up properly, if we create a booking here, then if I go in and make some changes, let's add a departure service. On bookings in the system now, go to the Inventory tab. We have an audit trail on the individual booking. This up will allow you to track any modifications that have made to specific bookings in the system. So if a customer has, if it's believed that a customer didn't order a modification, or there's a question about what was done to the booking and you need to track down who made changes when, the audit trail will show you when the booking was created and when modifications were made to it and who did them. So it's a good way to track down fingerprints within the system. Let's go back to the employee section again, which is admin protected. When you're creating your access rights, you also have the ability to select or unselect all to make it easier if you want to add after that or take away from this. Let's give me my cash drawer back. You also have the option to set up preset levels. What you do is click the set level button, which is not which I cannot access under my login ID, as it's a main admin feature. So let's close that. back in the employee section. We can set up our security levels here. Now with the security levels, we can create default security levels for types of employees. So if I want to set up a specific type for cashiers, for example, I can do that. And then we can choose specific items that we want the cashiers to be able to access. I'm just going to pick a couple randomly here. This is not a recommendation for cashiers in the system. Once you create that security level, click Save. Now, of course, you want to make sure, as I just didn't do, whenever you're adding anything in the system, you want to click the Add or New button first, and then create your document or settings. Once your default level is created, click Save. You'll see it appear here in the security level list. Then, when adding new employees later, you can go to the Set Level button, choose the security level you want, and those settings will be automatically applied to that employee. Save that back the way it was. Moving on from the access rate section, we have the time cards. Here is where your punch-ins and punch-outs will be tracked in the system. For employees to punch in and out, we have the little time clock up here at the top. For that, I just need to log in as an employee here. Actually, you don't need to do that. For logging in, it doesn't matter who's logged into the system. When you check the time clock will pop up. The employee chooses their name from the drop-down menu. If you do not have login IDs and passwords set up, all you have to do is choose the employee, choose clock in or clock out, and they will automatically be punched in or out. However, if you do have the login ID set up properly, once the employee chooses whether to clock in or out and check punch, ask for their password. This is to make sure that you don't have employees punching each other out. As you see, we have notification that the punch is successful. I'm going to do a quick punch out as well. Your employees also have the option to check their current schedule. Hours worked either this pay period or last pay period. Select the proper one, put their password in, so your employees can keep track of how many hours they have without checking with you. Click the Calculate button, not the Punch button, and your employee will be showed how much time they currently have on their time card, either for current period or last period. In this case, 1 minute for my punch in and out. If you purchase the card swipe for the time clock from Kennel Connection, your employees can bring up with the time clock. All they have to do is swipe their card, and it'll automatically set them in. All they do is choose clock in or clock out, swipe the card, and it automatically makes that punch. Also, you have the paid lunch hour you can check if their hour lunch is paid, and that will, if they're punching in and out for lunch, that'll add that extra lunch hour back. Back to the employee section. Now let's go in as admin here. On the time card for Joey, we'll see we have the punch in and out. You can modify an employee's punches with the modify button. So here we can go in and say that this was a PM punch, and instead of 10:26, it was 4:35. We can choose the reason for it. If you want to keep track of who's making the changes, put an approval name in. Click OK. You see the changes occurred up here. If we open that up, we have the missed punch checked, and the approval code is here. Any notes you want to leave as well can be added here. You'll also notice in the bottom right-hand corner, Kennel Connection tracks the current time for the employees for that time period. So you don't have to do any calculations. Kennel Connection will automatically show you that. You can also go to previous or the next pay period as well. I'm going to skip payroll and go to the schedule. Here's where you can set up employee schedules for when they're supposed to work. You can also have, if you're using schedules, especially if you're setting up the grooming section properly, when your schedules are set up, Kennel Connection will alert you if an employee is not scheduled to work at the time that you're creating a booking for them. If you don't enter any schedules in here, that will not occur. To create a schedule, click Add. That will bring up our schedule window. Enter the times you want. If you have your employees punch out for lunch, you can always put a second time in as well. These are just loose demonstrations, obviously. Once you enter in your time schedule, click OK. After choosing the period ending date, whether it's for this week, next week, etc., you can schedule in as far as advance as you need. As you can see, the schedule appears in this window for whichever pay period is selected. The hours scheduled appear in the lower right-hand corner, so you can keep track of how many hours you are scheduling for your employees. You can create future schedules easier by selecting a pay period, clicking the copy button. Then you can select the pay period. It defaults to the next pay period from the one you're copying. You can choose a different one if you want, and click OK. That has now copied the schedule over to the other time period. You can then open up to modify it to make any minor changes that need to be made. The time-saving device allows you to schedule quicker than if you're entering all the times in manually. Also notice that from here we can print our schedules or email them to our employees. One of the reasons you want to have your employees' email on their main employee card. This will email the schedule to the individual employees. Beyond this, we have a notes section. This is just a general area to enter notes on the employees that you want to keep. And then I'm going to double back to the payroll info because we're getting into commissions here. And I did understate how long it's going to take to get to this webinar. We're going to go for the full 45 minutes, and this is due to how large the commission section is now. In the basic payroll tab, you set your pay method, whether it's commission, flat rate, hourly, or salary. If it's commission, you will still be able to track an hourly rate. It does not preclude them from that. But if they are an hourly rate and get commission on top of that, you want to check commission. Then the frequency of the payroll period, weekly, biweekly, or monthly. If you want to keep track of how many hours per pay period, you can do that. There's an automatic calculation of payroll for that week. If you want to keep track of hire dates or termination dates, you can do that. That's not needed in the system. Also, for the grooming module, in the setup section, you can choose whether to track maximum number of bookings allowed in grooming, either for your facility as a whole or for individual employees. So in the case of this one, I have it set up to set the maximum pets for grooming services on individual employees. So here I can set the maximum number of baths, grooms, nails, and other grooms that this employee is allowed to be booked for in one day. And then finally, one of the big changes to Kennel Connection in Kennel Connection 6 is the Commissions tab. As you'll see, the Commissions is much larger than it used to be if you're familiar with Kennel Connection 5. First, we have our basic setting. On the Commissions tab, we have our basic hourly rate. And then we have our flat commission rate. Let's say this employee gets a flat rate of 12%. The flat rate affects any item in the system that does not otherwise have a specific rate attached to it. Let's just cover the basic commission first. In order to be able to set up an employee for a commission, they have to have a rate here under the General tab or a rate under specific items, or just be marked as commission. For the general commission, there are two ways you can assign commissions for an employee. First is to enter a commission amount here. In this case, this employee is going to get 12% commission on any item marked as commissionable in the system. In order to mark items as commissionable, I'm going to go to the inventory section. In the inventory section, every item, whether it's a service or a product, has a box here for commission. If this box is checked, any employee who has a commission set as their pay type will receive a commission on this inventory item. Kennel Connection will grab that rate either from the general setting on the employee's commission tab or from the rate set down here. This is where it gets a little complicated, so bear with me. And if you have any questions, please ask me after the presentation. There's a number of different levels here on which you can set commissions. It gives you more flexibility, but you want to keep track of what you're doing because it can get a little complicated. So here we have the percentage rate here. I'm going to set this for boarding. Well, let's do something a bit more realistic. Let's go to grooming. I'm going to set the grooming one as 5%. So right now we have groom checked as commissionable, and we have a 5% rate attached to it. Save that and close. So if Joey here has their payroll set as commissionable, as commissions, and they're doing groomings, and this commission box is blank. Let's jump down to Joey. That's one thing to keep in mind too, as you just saw. When you save something in the employee section, it automatically jumps back up to the admin ID. You'll have to reselect the employee again. So with the groom inventory item set as commissionable with a 5% commission, if the commission box is blank for this employee and they're set to receive commission, they will receive that 5% commission on that grooming if they're attached to a grooming on an invoice. If, however, the employee has a flat rate in the commission box, which I had before at 12%, that 12% is going to override the inventory item's commission rating. The commission setting on the inventory items is only for employees, is only going to affect employees who receive commission but do not have an item in this commission box. So that way you can conceivably have a flat rate for services in the system that anybody gets as long as they receive commission. So if you want your employee to receive a special flat rate for any inventory item in the system, enter that rate here. With this setting, Joey now gets 12% commission on any inventory item marked as commissionable, regardless of what the commission setting is on that inventory item. So that's our two levels at the moment. We have a base commission level for any item in the system and a base commission level for any employee in the system. Now beyond that, the major expansion for Kennel Connection 6 is we now have the option to choose specific rates for an employee for specific inventory items. To add a commissionable item for an employee, and this can be for a product or a service, click Add. I'm going to click Modify. It's going to open up the same window. It's going to show the employee name at the top, which would be the employee you have selected here. Then you're going to choose your item code from your inventory. Clicking the little Browse button is going to bring up your inventory list, and you'll be able to select from System Items, which are the main inventory items that come hard-coded into the system. You can choose for products, which I don't have any set up in here right now, which would be any items you're selling, or services, which would include any additional services you create in the system. Once you've selected the item, click OK. I'm going to click Cancel because I'm modifying this, but you'll click OK to save whatever you're doing. Actually, I'll click OK just so we can see. Select the grooming, click OK. Item code appears here with the description. You then choose whether the commission they're receiving on this is a percentage or a flat rate. Enter that rate. Click OK. Any items in here that are entered for an employee will override this commission rate or the commission rate on the inventory. So you do have three different options for how employees receive commissions on items. with this detailed box here, you can conceivably attach a specific rate for each employee for a different item and still have a flat rate for the employee and for the inventory item in case you have other employees that don't receive those specific rates. So there's much more flexibility here. You really have unlimited ability to fine-tune your commissions for individual employees. And you can do this across the board. If you don't want to bother with the flat rate or the percentage on the inventory items, all you have to do is make sure that the inventory item is checked as commissionable and enter your detailed rates here for each individual employee. As in Kennel Connection 5, these commissions, let me just see if I have an open invoice here. Here we go. These commissions are registered in the system once an invoice is created. So here we have an invoice, and there is a groom on this invoice and a nail trim. As in Kennel Connection 5, you can check to see if an employee is connected to the booking item by right-clicking. Right-clicking the invoice will show the employee that is attached and give you the option to modify the employee. If you're adding a new item in your invoice, select the item you're adding. And as we right-click, you will see that the employee selected is none. You can click Modify to add an employee to this. If you are using login IDs, you will not need to put in an admin ID to add an employee to an item in an invoice. However, if you are modifying an item in the invoice with an employee that's already attached, you'll have to add an admin ID. So that way, any employee with access to creating invoices can add an employee to there, but they have to have admin access to modify an employee that's already been added to the invoice through a booking. Then we can make that change. Once your invoices are saved, you can run a commission report in the report section. That's going to be under revenue. It's going to be at the very top. That's the first report we have available in the revenue section. When running your commission report, you can obviously, as with most cases, you can choose the screen or printer. You can choose the number of copies. We can also select an individual employee if we just want to print out commissions for one employee. Choose your time frame. You can also choose whether you want to have one employees per page, so you can print out for all employees but separate them. In this case, I'm going to bring them all up in the same report. And as you can see, here's our commission report that shows the commission rates against what was paid. As you can see here, I've got the 10% rate for the items for this employee. And for this employee, we have 15, 30, and 15 coming off their special settings. You'll see the rates attached here. There's no rate on this side because there was no dollar charge for that item. And then we have our totals for the individual employee and total commissions overall. If you are using the commissions in Kennel Connection and you find that when you run the commission report, there are commissions that you think should be on there that aren't, please double check the three main settings that you want to make sure are set for those employees to receive their commission. Check the employee cards. Make sure that they are selected as pay method commission and that they have a commission rate, either in the commission box or a commission item down here or on the inventory item. Next, go to your inventory section and make sure that the item that you're looking for a commission on is checked as commissionable. Finally, go to the specific invoice and make sure that the employee was actually attached to the invoice. And just to backtrack and reiterate for any of our attendees who might not be a Kennel Connection 5 user and we're just starting to use Kennel Connection 6 in a demo, these names are attached automatically to an invoice created from a booking if the employee is already attached to the booking item. So if we go to Grooming, for example, when you create your bookings, you have the option to attach an employee to a booking. They'll appear in this drop-down here. When they're attached, they will appear on the invoice when you create an invoice for this booking. Then when the invoice is created, again, you can double check to make sure that they were attached properly, make modifications to it by right-clicking there. So if your commission reports don't seem to be working properly, check those 3 main steps. There are a lot of possibilities for an item to be overlooked on the initial setup, especially if the commission setup is new to you. Now that's basically it as far as the basic settings for setting up employees in the section. I think the most important things to remember about this webinar, this overview of the employee section, is as I just finished up the advanced commissions options for employees. Also, the setup of access rights, which includes setting up your login IDs and passwords to make sure they are accessed properly. Just as a overview at the end, those are here in the system options section, being the use startup password and security features, and use administration login. And not only will this allow the access rights to work where employees are restricted from entering areas that you don't want them to access, it will also allow you to run the audit trail, showing all transactions that have taken place in the program. You can see the number of transactions that have occurred since the last time we looked, including invoices, employees, clients, the groom schedule, even new items added to the schedule are showing. Punch-ins and punch-outs, the audit trail shows everything. And as I mentioned before, the additional feature in Kennel Connection 6 allows you also to check the audit trail for individual bookings and who's made modifications to that booking. These are the main features of the employee section that we've gone over, not including the time cards and schedules. At this point, I want to end the formal presentation and open up the chat window to questions. If you have any questions regarding anything I've gone over in the system, especially the commission section, because with our additions, like I said, it can be a bit confusing until you get the hang of it as far as what overrides what on the different levels of commissions. So please feel free to ask those questions now. Please keep in mind that if you don't get a chance to ask any questions, or you're watching this as a recorded video and you do have questions regarding an aspect of this, please feel free to contact me at Kennel Connection. You can email me at scott@bluecrystalsoftware.com, or you can call me at 888-486-4343, extension 307. I have one question in the chat window now. If you give a manager admin rights, can you still block them from the audit trail to track their actions without them being able to clear their own audit trail? Very good question. That covers 2 points. The first point, I'm going to go backwards on that question. If we go to the audit trail, let me get to the utility section there. The first thing one thing you'll notice here is we don't have the ability to make any modifications per se to the audit trail, nor do we have the ability to delete certain items from the audit trail. The only way to get rid of the audit trail is to purge entire month. In this case, I have the month of August selected, so it's going to ask me if I want to purge the entire month of August. I'm going to say no to that. So you can't piecemeal it. You can only wipe the entire slate clean. If we go to the trail on the inventory card, since that's a report, you can't get rid of that. That's hard-coded in the system. So you will not be able to wipe the slate, as you could say, for that, unless the booking itself is deleted. Now, as for the access rights, and this is why it's a very good question. Let's go back here. If you give an employee administrative access, so in this case, Scott has administrative access, they can enter any admin areas. This does not override access rights. Even though this employee has access to administrative areas, this employee can still be blocked from deleting receipts, lists, entering different areas. So if we have an employee who has admin access, we can still prevent them from entering, for example, the employee section or the time card section and making any changes there. However, we do not have an option to restrict access to the audit trail. So any employee you give access to administrative-wise will be able to access the audit trail. But again, the audit trail can only be wiped out for an entire month at a time, and the individual booking ones can only be wiped out if the actual booking is deleted itself. And again, that will show up on the audit trail. If you restrict admin access to only 1 or 2 employees, then it kind of narrows down the option of who would be able to access that. And also, since we're talking about those access rights, I want to point out that the main admin ID, you cannot undo any access rights. The main admin ID that comes with the program has full access rights that cannot be removed. So if you're going to use the admin ID for a specific person in the system, you want to make sure it's somebody who you trust with access to all parts of the program. I have another question in the chat window. When you modify time cards, does KC6 require an approval by name? No, Kennel Connection does not require an approval by name. That is only there for reference. But as you saw, any modifications to payroll will appear in the audit trail, so you can track them. That modification by any name is really just there. Let me go back to one where I can show this. That approval is not needed. If I delete that and click OK, it's still going to record it as it is. That's just there for your reference. But again, any modifications made in here, if the audit trail set up properly, will be tracked there. So you will be able to see who made that modification. I'm just giving us a moment or two in case there are any further questions from our attendees. My apologies for the awkward silence. I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to enter their questions into the system. I also just want to point out, since we are, this webinar is involving Kennel Connection 6, I do want to point out that the webinars for the rest of this week and next week are both doubled. We're having them at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. to try to get in new Kennel Connection 6 users. Also, these will be recorded on the anymeeting.com site, and we are posting some of them on YouTube as well. So you do have access for these after the fact if you need a refresher or if you need to go back for any meetings that you were not able to attend. I have another question in the chat window. Bear with me 1 second. It's a long one. I just want to make sure I can paraphrase this. If I have an employee with admin rights to the employees, but I modify what they can do in KC6, can't they log in and see the admin login passwords? Let me just answer that question through a demonstration. I'm logged in now as the admin ID, so I have full access to everything here. If I close this, I log in as Scott, who has administrative access, but is not the admin ID. We then go to the employee section. Normally that password is blocked out. Let me just answer that this should be blocked out when you're logged in as administrative access but not under admin. Apparently it is not at the moment, but that will change very quickly. Let's just confirm that I'm logged in on the right person. Yeah, from the program you're looking at now, the employee that's logged in will be able to see that admin access password. But when you get your program up and running after the release, which was this morning, you will this will be grayed out, and they will not have access to it when they log in. To answer that question, it's not working on this version here, but on the full version received this morning when downloading it for the demo, or the next available update, which will be shortly, that will be fixed. When emailed, when you email the schedules, the single employee schedule will go to that employee. Because when you're selecting the email one, you're selecting a specific employee to mail that to. So in this case, I'm selecting Joey here. I'm going to click email. It's going to say that email is blank because I don't have that set up in there. That's going to go just to this employee. So that schedule is only going to show the employee their schedule, not all employees. The same thing for printing, just printing the one schedule. So it doesn't combine them all, it just shows them each individual. We do not currently have a report that shows all the employee schedules together as some sort of time flow, time chart. In general, that's a report that has been requested by a couple of Kennel Connection users that we're looking to implement, hopefully in a future update of Kennel Connection 6. At the moment, we just don't have that report set up. Can you commission a category instead of individual products, such as all products in a retail category? No, at the moment we don't have the ability to commission a category, only individual items. That's done specifically to allow the flexibility we have in the system. As far as I understand it from a programming point of view, if we added the ability to add commissions to a category for all items under that, that would add another level of overrides in the system, and that was just a bit too much for the system to bear. So at the moment, we do have the 3 levels. So if you do want to give commissions for all groomings for a customer or employee, for an employee or for the inventory item, you will have to enter those either here or in the inventory section on the individual items. But again, if you're giving a flat commission on those inventory items in inventory, you can leave the commission blank. And so if you want to give a commission on all leashes in your facility, put the commission as 0, go to all the leases in the inventory section and adjust them all to that flat rate you want. And every employee who collects commission that has the commission box here 0 will receive that leash commission off the inventory item. And then you could override that if you add a specific commission in here for a leash for a certain employee if that employee is supposed to receive more. We're coming up on the 11 o'clock hour. I realize we did start a few minutes late for this webinar. My apologies. Again, if there's any questions you weren't able to get squeezed into this presentation, please feel free to contact me after the webinar. Also, please keep in mind that one more question did pop up, and I will answer that just as soon as I finish this. Just keep in mind that as Kennel Connection 6 is releasing this week, and we have a lot of customers who have pre-ordered or have been waiting for the release. We have a large number of customers who will be starting using Kennel Connection as of today. And with that in mind, we are anticipating a higher call volume than normal for customers with questions about the system. So with that in mind, if you do call and get my voicemail and leave a message, or you send me an email, please keep in mind that we are going to have a delay on responses to training questions. Also, if you do have questions regarding Kennel Connection 6 during a demo or usage, or you have questions that are technical in nature or are in regards to pricing, please, instead of contacting me regarding those questions, contact our main number and choose the extension for either the technical department or the sales department, and try to keep any communication with me just in regards to training aspects, which would be the usage of the program internally. That will just ease the call volume down a little bit and allow me to return questions from customers that much more quickly. And before we log out, I have one more question here I just want to get to. If you set up a commissionable item in the inventory list, does it automatically load it to the commissionable product to the employee section or no? No, it does. It does not. Does it automatically load it to the commissionable product to the employee section or no? No. The inventory item that's marked as commissionable, if you put a commission on that, that commission is a system default. Any employee that has a commission pay method selected with a commission box of 0 will receive that default inventory item commission rate. If you want to think of it as far as default levels, the first default level is the lowest default level is the inventory section. If employees have no commission rate selected but they are commissionable, they receive that first level default, which is the inventory section. The next level of default is the commission box. The commission box overrides any rates in the inventory section. The third level of default is the specific inventory commission in this box here. Any commissions entered into this box override the default commission in the commission box and override the default commission in the inventory section. Like I said, it can be a little confusing, but if you keep that hierarchy in mind, you'll figure out how to set up the commissions you want for whom. So you don't have to add every individual item to the employee commission section if they're receiving the same commission on the inventory item. If everybody is receiving 10% on leash sales, all you have to do is leave this at 0 and put the leash sales at 10%. If your employees have a different default, and again, this default box here is mainly if you have an employee that you want to say you get 15% of anything no matter what you do if it's commissionable. If you don't have a setup like that, leave that as 0. Enter all your commission rates either in the inventory section, which will cover all employees that have commissions with a 0 in the commission box, or add them individually to the employees if you want to give them a specific individual rate other than the inventory section. So I'm going to wrap up this webinar here. Once again, thank you for attending. At the end of this webinar, we have a questionnaire available. If you have the time to fill it out, please do. Let us know if you have any suggestions for future webinars. Let us know what you thought of the presentation, the content, the technology involved. Again, we have webinars all through the next couple weeks regarding Kennel Connection 6, and those videos of those webinars afterwards are posted on anymeeting.com or the YouTube site. You can contact me directly at scott@bluecrystalsoftware.com or 888-486-4343. I want to thank you once again for attending this webinar. Hope to have you at future ones, and please have a good day.